a student of Miss May Golda Bocares in the subject of Foundation of Special and Inclusive Education under the course of Bachelor of Technical and Livelihood Education, major in Industrial Arts, from the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines. And for this mini lecture, we will discuss the topic of Chapter 1, the basic concepts of special and inclusive education. To begin with the discussion, let's first define the inclusive education and the special education. The inclusive education is about putting the right to education into action by including all learners, respecting their diverse needs, abilities and characteristics, and eliminating all forms of discrimination in the learning environment. It is the process of strengthening the capacity of the education system to reach out to all learners. Therefore, including is the process that helps overcome barriers limiting the presence, participation, and achievement of learners. Special education, on the other hand, is defined as classes or instruction designed for students with disabilities, giftedness, and talents. Special education needs is a term used in some countries to refer to children with impairments that are seen as requiring additional support. Along with IE and SpEd, other related concepts include mainstreaming and integration. Mainstreaming is the practice of educating students with learning challenges in regular classes, in the least restrictive environment based on their skills. While integration, according to Franklin, refers to the creation of spaces such as regular classrooms, special education classrooms, or pull-out services for diverse learners. A school that admits learners with disabilities and combines them with regular pupils in the regular classroom is said to perform integration, while the classroom is called as a mainstream classroom. However, this setup does not automatically mean that they already practice inclusion. UNESCO states that inclusion is the process of addressing and responding to the diversity of needs of all learners through increasing participation in learning, cultures, and communities, and reducing exclusion within and from education. It involves changes and modifications in content, approaches, structures, and strategies, with a common vision which covers all children of the appropriate age range and the conviction that it is the responsibility of the regular system to educate all children. Once a child with autism spectrum disorder, for example, is officially enrolled in the regular classroom, participates actively in class activities without being excluded, and is seen to increase achievement, then this pupil undergoes inclusion. Let's have this figure that shows the differences of integration, exclusion, segregation, and inclusion for better understanding. In exclusion, we can see here that the persons with disabilities are out of the place where the regular ones are. While in segregation, we can see that the persons with disabilities has their own place separated from the regular. And in integration, it is shown in the figure that the persons with disabilities are in the same place with the regular but are specially grouped. And in inclusion, the persons with disabilities are mixed altogether with the regular students. We can see from this table the conceptualization of inclusion, mainstreaming, and integration. In inclusion, on the first row, the placement of learners in the regular class is based on age, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. While in mainstreaming, the placement in the regular class is based on the admission requirements. And in integration, the placement in the regular class in one or more subjects or activities. For each second row, in inclusion, there are no pull-outs and no shadow teaching. While in mainstreaming, provisions of interaction with regular children with the regular class as the child's station. And in integration, provisions of interaction with regular children with the SpEd class as the child's station. And on its last row, for inclusion, individualization within the class without pull-out, while in mainstreaming may include shadow teaching in the regular class, provision for pull-out, and one-on-one. And in integration may include tutorial and other learning assistance programs. Different interpretations of inclusive education exist in the Philippines, where the term inclusion is used interchangeably with mainstreaming and integration. In 2014, a focus group discussion among educational leaders from different regions in the country was conducted and a consensus on the Philippine inclusive education was built. The Philippine inclusive education was then defined as a process where all types of learners with diverse needs are given equal opportunities for a meaningful life in non-discriminatory environments. These environments foster belongingness through culturally or spiritually sensitive, learner-centered curriculum, learning processes, delivery modes, and settings. In this definition, the types of learners referred to are those who are gifted and talented, indigenous people, Muslim people, and those with disabilities. It is envisioned that students with disabilities are placed in a setting along with their age mates that have access to general education program for social inclusion or in the alternative learning system for access to educational inclusion. But in practice, students with disabilities in the Philippines are either placed in an inclusive regular education setting or in a special education setting. The table here presents the concept of both settings. In inclusive education, all learners, regardless of the condition, participate in a mainstream classroom alongside their age peers. The learners adhere to a prescribed curriculum and methodology with some accommodations, adaptations, and modifications to meet the needs of learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents. All students simply require good instruction, but different teaching strategies may be employed to those with low or very high education needs. The general education teacher oversees the learning of students and in some cases with the help of a shadow teacher or a special education teacher. Ideal number of learners in a classroom is 30 to 35. While in special education, the learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents are accommodated in a special class along with other learners of the same condition. A special curriculum is structured on the learner's condition, example intellectual disability, visual impairments, but is based on the regular curriculum. The learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents are given specialized and intensive instruction anchored on their curriculum. The special education teacher oversees the learning of the learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents with the collaborative partnerships of other professionals listed in the Individualized Education Plan or Program, or also known as IEP. In special education, it is possible to have one-on-one or a group of 3 to 4 or for resource group of 5 to 10. Special education refers to programs that cater to the educational needs of learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents, apart from their same-aged peers. SpEd involves planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating a specially designed and coordinated set of services through an Individualized Education Plan or Program, IEP, tailored to identify and address the specific strengths and limitations toward their educational, social, behavioral, and physical development. Learners with special education needs are also referred to as students with additional needs, children with special needs, students with special education needs, or children with special education needs and disabilities. According to Bustos, it is preferable to use the term learners with disabilities, since the rights of persons with disabilities are fundamental human rights and are not special rights. Additionally, the term disability is not a derogatory term, while the term special might be. The diagram that is shown here presents the differences between special, regular, integrated, and inclusive education. In special education, there are learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents, square pegs for square holes, and special teachers for special school. While in regular education, there are regular child and round pegs for round holes, and regular teachers for regular school. Both the learners of special education and regular education fit to whose teacher they have and in what school they're in. But in integrated education, there is a therapy rehabilitation, where the system stays the same and the child has to be the one to change in order to fit to the system. While in inclusive education, the system is flexible. Children may be different from each other, but all children can learn. In here, it has to be the system to change in order for the child to fit. Inclusive education is transformative rather than just being alleviative, and it equates to the idea of equity as presented in this figure. On the first panel of illustration, every child, regardless of their height, is given the same resources. This represents equality, where everyone is given the same support with the assumption that once all children are provided with the same opportunities, every one of them were catered properly. However, this kind of fairness does not yield a result where everyone is able to access the opportunity to see over the fence. Therefore, equality does not mean equity because every child is different. Some might require more assistance while others might not. Equity, as presented on the second panel of illustration, is about fairness in every situation. The boxes that represent supports are differentiated, individualized or personalized to match the diverse needs of children, making them view the game regardless of their height difference. But why are there barriers present in the first place? In reality, these represent systemic and educational barriers that limit learners' participation. Volume then replaced the barriers on the second panel of illustration with a chain-link fence where all children can see the game without any additional support. According to her, this represents the removal of systemic barriers that could ultimately create equitable systems of education. The removal of these barriers or the anticipation of these needs of the audience in the field is an example of a good inclusive practice. Likewise, in education, if the teacher anticipates different behaviors, types, needs, and concerns of learners as the teacher develops lesson plans, instructional materials, or assessment tools, then the teacher practices inclusion or removal of barriers that limit learners' presence, participation, and achievement. It is also important to differentiate between the terms accommodation or adaptations and modifications. In making education inclusive, teachers use both accommodation and modification strategies in teaching. Accommodations change how the learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents learn the same material and meet the same expectations as their age peers. For example, a person with visual impairments using audiobooks, highlighted texts, or large print materials, while modification changes what a student is taught or expected to learn. For example, a person with intellectual disability used less complicated text materials of different content topic than their age peers. Through these strategies, learners with disabilities and those with academic challenges are provided with materials that meet their learning needs. The term disability is often confused with impairment. The precondition to completely understand its definition is by becoming acquainted with its two major disability models, medical and social model. As seen on this figure, the medical model of disability presents a traditional view of looking at persons with disabilities as the problem that needs fixing. The PWD obviously cannot climb up the stairs simply because he is in a wheelchair and has no other access to the next floor. The medical model of disability sees that the part of his body that is impaired needs to be fixed first for him to get to the next floor. On the social model, disability is seen to be caused by the barriers in society. These barriers include inaccessible environments. Example, no ramps in buildings, no subtitles in movie houses for persons with hearing impairments, and no sound signals for persons with visual impairments in crossing the streets. Negative attitudes, for example, fear, overprotective family, stigma, negative media and labeling, and inflexible organization, for example, segregated or poor education, housing problems, discrimination in employment. Without these barriers, PWDs can easily access facilities, healthcare, policies, and education systems the same way the regular beings do. The table here shows a comparison between the two models. In medical model, the person with disability is the problem. He is the one that needs to change. PWDs become the victim or client that their responsibilities are disempowered. Assessment, monitoring, and evaluation are imposed by therapy. Segregation and alternative services are given. Society remains unchanged. While in social model, the barriers created by the society are the problem. The barriers need to be removed. PWDs have independence, control, and choice. Resources are made available to regular services. Training of parents and professionals are provided, and society evolves. The World Health Organization in 2011 has pointed out that disability should be viewed neither as purely medical nor purely social, since neither is a better model than the other. Instead, they promoted the conceptual framework of the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health, also known as ICF, the biopsychosocial model. In this framework, disability refers to the difficulties encountered in three connected areas: impairments, activity limitations, and participation restriction. Impairments are problems in body function or alterations in body structure, for example, deafness, paraplegia, or strabismus. Activity limitations are difficulties in executing activities, for example, walking, writing, or eating. And participation restrictions are defined as problems with involvement in any area of life, for example, admission to school, employment, or access to buildings. Disability therefore arises from the interaction of health conditions with the contextual factors such as environmental and personal factors. Environmental factors can either be facilitators or barriers such as products and technology, the natural and built-in environment, support and relationships, attitudes, and services, systems, and policies. Personal factors, on the other hand, can influence the participation of a person in the society, such as motivation and self-esteem. In the school setting, apart from structural barriers, many learners with disabilities face attitudinal barriers that could lead to isolation and low achievement in the classroom. As a pre-service teacher, it is important to avoid discriminatory behavior and language towards learners with disabilities, to be sensitive enough not to make them feel different from other students in the school, and also to avoid name-calling, for example, using the term SpEd to denote poor performance and misbehavior regardless of the person's condition, when SpEd clearly refers to a program and not individuals. Another way to model non-discriminatory behavior is by being sensitive to the words used to address people with disabilities. Language use is not difficult, so if you are referring to PWDs in your sentence construction, use the people first policy, where the word people or person is used followed by their condition or impairment. For example, use the phrase person with an intellectual disability instead of using intellectually disabled person or mentally retarded or learning disabled. One can also use the phrase person with mental health impairment instead of using mentally ill, mental patient, or insane. This practice shifts the focus on the individual rather than their condition. The terms abnormal or even special may also be deemed offensive, so avoid using these terms. And that's all for this mini lecture. I hope you learned from this chapter's topic the basic concepts of special and inclusive education. Thank you for listening. Have a great day and God bless!